Okay, you're good to go.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody out to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting, the St. Patrick's Day edition, March 17th, 2021. I'm Vice Chairman Mason, and I'm going to be conducting the meeting until Commissioner Thomas shows up. He hasn't not indicated that he won't be here, but he has not joined online yet, and we all know how joining these things online can be. So we're going to start with the meeting and let him join, and at that time he'll take over. I do note that he's on the agenda, so I will probably be conducting that section of it anyway at that point. We're going to start tonight with, as we always do, with an invocation or a thought from Commissioner Webb, after which I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Webb, please.
I'll say a prayer. Father in heaven, we're very grateful to be gathered here together as representatives of North Ogden City. We're grateful for this beautiful and wonderful place that we live in. We ask that would bless us with the ability to concentrate and communicate well, and with the intent of helping North Ogden City to be a better place to live and welcoming for all of our residents and others. And these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. I will now repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. If you choose to stand or follow along with me, you may. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please note that I recited the pledge without any notes or visual cues whatsoever. I clicked on something and lost our agenda, so bear with me just one second. But I believe we're at minutes approval, if I'm not mistaken.
You are.
We have 2 minutes for approval this evening because the February 17th minutes were not presented to us quick enough for our review on the last meeting. And then, as always, we're going to review the minutes of the last meeting. So did anyone have a chance to review those, and would anyone like to submit a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion we consider that we approve the February 17, 2021 and March 3rd, 2021 Planning Commission meetings as they are.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion about that? Okay, we'll take a voice vote. All who can approve the minutes, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Thank you. Okay, I will now read an opening minute statement, which is designed to help the public understand our procedures here. This is the Zoom version. So before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, examples, pictures, or written materials, are part of the record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to have registered their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then you can state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission, and please silence your microphone until you are ready to speak. And again, simply unsilencing your microphone will not enable us to hear you. So we kind of ask that you use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom meeting, and we'll call on you if the time is appropriate for those comments. So thank you. Let's see. Okay. Ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose. I was really hoping Eric would be here by now, because Chairman Thomas does have an item on the agenda, I noted, and I would suggest he be excused from the discussion during that part, except for to participate as an applicant under the parameters as I just read them, where he gets his say as an applicant and then his final rebuttal time. Other than that, he will not be participating in the discussion. Is that everyone okay with that? Thank you. Aside from Commissioner Thomas, were there any other conflicts of interests or ex parte communications that we feel need to come forward? I have none. I've reviewed the agenda. I've reviewed the details of the packet, and I see no conflicts of interest for myself either. Okay, we are interested in hearing from the public for all sorts of things. Now is the time when we'd like to hear from you guys for any item that may not be on the agenda. Again, if your comments are specific to an agenda item, we'd ask that you hold on to those for a minute and bring them up at the appropriate time when we're speaking to that agenda item. But for anything else which may not fall on the agenda, now is the time to address those. And we'll pause for a second, let the public or anyone use the raise their hand feature. We seeing anything, Lynn?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, we'll close the public comments again. Again, if you do have a comment about an agenda item, please bring it up at the appropriate time. Item number 6 on our agenda is a discussion about a field trip to discuss streetscape standards. I'm not sure who wants who has what to talk about there, but I think that's a good idea. A lot of the things we've been discussing have been a little abstract until you actually see them. Even when they're laid out well in artist renderings and stuff, sometimes it just helps to see it, to feel it. So I'm totally in support of a field trip. I don't know how COVID changes any of that. We've historically kind of driven around in a large van where we could talk and bounce ideas, and the public's even joined us on a few of those. I don't know how COVID changes that, but Rob, was this something you wanted to talk about? Was this your item? Or Brandon?
I can. Is Kai here?
I'm here, Rob.
Oh, fire away, Kai.
Well, I'm available for whenever the Planning Commission is available. Rob mentioned that we did have 5 Wednesdays this week if we wanted to try and do it on the 5th Wednesday.
Just check my schedule real quick.
That's going to be March 31st.
So Kai, how logistically, how would you see this playing? Would we all get in a van or just follow in cars, or with the COVID, how do you recommend it happening?
That's a really good question, Nicole. I think that's what everybody feels comfortable, as well as what kind of guidelines we have in place with the city. Probably a combination of those two things, I would think.
Okay.
So my only concern on it, I think we could totally work out a situation where we could probably get a van and we could all pile in. Those who are comfortable and those who aren't comfortable could follow in their own car, and we could have speakerphones and things. I don't know how that works with where it is technically a public meeting if we get together. I really don't. I mean, we're in uncharted territory there. I don't know how to invite the public who may not feel comfortable. I mean,
Yeah, Kai, it's Commissioner Nancaro. I was just thinking that, if you had a few key places where, like, say the bus would stop and people would kind of get out, we could talk about, whatever we were looking at, say a few different points along the route. It sounds like the streetscape we're really just focusing mainly Monroe and Mountain Road, right?
Commissioner, we probably have to talk about our route beforehand and lay out a few the places definitely to stop and discuss things for sure.
Yeah, I think that would work just fine.
and then give a few meeting points to anyone. I mean, it's pretty seldom that anyone shows up for those, but if someone wanted to, we could give them a few meeting points. I think that's completely reasonable.
I think that's a good idea. I know city employees are wearing masks in the trucks when they ride around with each other. So I assume those kind of guidelines would have to apply to us as well if it's going to try to do that.
So we'll come up with a recommendation as far as how to accommodate the COVID concerns and what have you. In the past, Commissioner Thomas has had a large van that he has been willing to be the chauffeur, if you will. So we'll coordinate with him and see if that'll work. But if March 31st is going to work for everybody, I guess the question is, how early do you want to meet? Do you want to meet a little earlier, or 6:30 still the time that you would like to go? I think with daylight savings time, we're fine.
I think 6:30 gives me enough time to get done with work and then get down there.
Sure.
So I
So
don't know how that works for the rest of you. Now's your chance if you want a different time. All right, Rob, let's go with 6:30 unless it's otherwise noted.
6:30 on the 31st. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that'll be very helpful. All right, do we have Eric yet?
I don't see him yet.
Why does he do this to me? Okay, all right. Administrative item number 7 is discussion and action regarding the final approval for Coldwater Meadow subdivision. It's approximately 900 east and 2200 south, and it's presented by Brandon Bell.
Good evening, members of the commission. So this is consideration and action for, and I'm sorry, it's for actually for final approval of the Coldwater Meadows subdivision. Preliminary occurred a couple of months ago. The project area is just over 2 acres. The zoning was recently rezoned to R1 12.5. And this is an administrative decision, and administrative applications must be approved by the Planning Commission if the application demonstrates compliance with the approval criteria. The applicant is requesting final approval for phase 3 of Coldwater Meadows subdivision. And there's been a technical review on this already. The city engineers submitted a review memo dated March 3rd, 2021, and with some requirements in that report. And there were also some minor issues regarding boundary closures. Those have been resolved since the time this report was completed. And we have a geotechnical report as well as a will serve letter for sanitary sewer and secondary water. Again, the subdivision's been rezoned so that it's entirely in the R1 12.5 zone. And the requirements for that are a minimum of 12,500 square feet on interior lots and 13,500 square feet on corner lots, with a lot width requirement of 100 feet at the 30-foot setback. The lot widths have been verified to meet that lot width requirement, and the applicant has provided an updated square footage for all lots, stating that they meet the square footage requirements for the R1 12.5 zone. In addition, unnecessary easements that were previously on the preliminary version of the plat have been removed from this version of the plat. With this subdivision, the applicant is actually proposing to take property from phase 2 of this subdivision, which has already been recorded, and include that in this phase. I believe it was lot 12 from phase 2. Weber County is understood to be fine with that action, and staff recommends as a condition of approval that the applicant be permitted to make any adjustment to the plat necessary to do related to that lot, and including there may need to be some adjustments to the property signing statements or related adjustments if they're needed. The lot that they're using, I believe it's lot 24, it meets our requirements. We're just leaving that request there as a recommended condition of approval in case there's some issue that can be ironed out to take that property from the previous phase. The city engineer has also stated that based on its location, that same lot, lot 24, does not need to be an R lot. Staff recommends that as a condition of approval that the R designation be removed from the plat. There is a temporary turnaround in place on the west side of this subdivision, and Staff's recommendation as a condition of approval is that the applicant needs to have an easement agreement for the temporary turnaround recorded against the property at the county prior to or at the same time as the recording of this subdivision. And that agreement include a condition regarding physical maintenance of the turnaround area. Some turnarounds in the city we had have not been maintained either due to weed growth or other material being put on them. And so since the city will be a party in that easement agreement and needs to consent to those terms, staff recommends that a copy of the agreement be provided to reviewed and or adjusted by the city attorney prior to recording. And this will ensure that the property and the turnaround will be physically maintained, and recommend that as a condition of approval. The fire marshal also recommended that there was a fire hydrant which was supposed to be installed in the last phase of this subdivision, which was not installed. The applicant needs to install the fire hydrant in this phase to meet fire safety requirements as a condition of approval. And if there's an existing blow off that can, in the prior phase, phase 2, that can be gotten rid of once the fire hydrant has been installed in this phase. And then finally, as has been discussed before, there was a trail connection that was not put in phase 2, and any attempt to put a trail in here would be an attempt to create a trail to nowhere. And so the Parks and Rec department is not interested in pursuing a trail on this phase of the subdivision. So some of the considerations that the Planning Commission has before them is, does the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? Is the proposed subdivision consistent with the general plan? The staff's view is that the subdivision as proposed with the conditions that have been mentioned meets the requirements of the applicable ordinances and the general plan. And the general plan also calls for this property to be developed as low density residential. So just to go over the recommended conditions of approval, they include the requirements of the city engineer's report, requirements of the technical review committee letter for previous phases, the resolving of any closure or related issues with the city engineer on the legal description, and then the R designation on lot 24 may be removed. The applicant be permitted to make adjustments necessary to amend the phase 2 plat via this plat that are related to lot 24, including adjusting property signing statements or related matters if needed. A copy of the turnaround agreement be provided to reviewed and potentially adjusted by the city attorney prior to recording to ensure that the property turnaround will be physically maintained. And then the applicant needs to install a fire hydrant in this phase. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission grant final approval of the Coldwater Meadows subdivision phase 3, subject to the conditions that have been mentioned in the staff report, the engineer's report, and the applicable technical review committee letter. I think that covers all of my prepared remarks. Does the commission have any questions for myself?
I do, Brandon. On conditions of approval, you had make adjustments as needed for lot 12 and recommended are removed from, I guess, is lot 24. Since they're under in the staff report in the bullet points, they wouldn't have to be mentioned separately, would they?
No, they're you could just refer to the conditions listed in the staff report since it's there, if I understand you correctly.
Brandon, what's the purpose of removing the R? In my head, R is the residential.
R stands for restricted. And so that's put on when there's extra conditions on a lot, typically due to a safety issue or geological issue, or in this case, there's a stream bed to the south of the lot, and the city engineers stated that it's a small enough portion that we don't need that R on there, and it's addressed by an easement that's been put on the rear of lot 24. So Does that answer your question, Commissioner
It does,
Mason?
thank you. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking our residential. I
Yeah, no worries.
got my wires crossed. Thanks.
You bet. Are there any other questions for me?
If there are no questions for the presentation, we'd invite the applicant to address us with any remarks he may have. We have a hand raised. Let's see who that is. That's John Hanson. He's our applicant.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. No, I think that,
Need your name and address.
John Hanson, 1100 or 1165 West, 4000 North in Pleasant View. I think with the staff and the engineers review and the adjustments they made, that it's just perfect. And we appreciate the attentiveness of everyone in North Ogden, that we continue to have our city grow in an organized manner. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Do we have other public comments? Pause for a second, give the public a chance to. We do have a hand raised.
They haven't signed in with their full name.
Lynn, I propose you elevate them for a second, let them state their full name. Or are we okay with that, Commission? Okay, if this becomes a problem, then we'll disallow this kind. Let's elevate them, let them give us their
Okay.
full name.
Go ahead, please
Verbally.
state your full name and address.
Hi, my name is Susan Kilborn. I'm at 3370 North, 400 East in North Ogden, Utah. And actually, I just have a question of my predecessor commentator. And I understand he lives in Pleasant View, but also, is this John Hanson, the realtor?
So ma'am, the questions have to be addressed to the Planning Commission. We do that to keep the quorum and to keep, the public from chatting one to another. I'm sure Mr. Hanson would be happy to answer that question, and I'm sure, I don't even know it's my place to say that, but he did state his name and address, and it's, but I can't allow talking between the public. So if you just address your comments to us, we'll consider those.
All right, well, I'm sure I can figure it out. So appreciate it and sorry if I.
No, it's fine.
been-
No. It's okay. We do try to keep decorum, and so, we're not trying to rule with an iron fist here, but we do have a level of standards we have to keep. So thank you for understanding.
Yep.
And we'll give the applicant final rebuttal time, and he can address that if he so chooses. He may not. Any other questions? Or comments, I should say. Comments from the public?
I don't see any more hands, Commissioner.
Okay, we would give the applicant final rebuttal time if he chooses to take it.
I think I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, we would need a motion on this, you guys, and we need some discussion about it. So generally, for the public's information, we like to have a motion from the get-go, even before we discuss it. That gives us something either positive or negative to talk towards. It doesn't always mean what is going to be finally resolved, but our process has been to throw a recommendation out there and then to work for or against it. So you may see that tonight, and just know that's pretty standard practice. So I'd welcome a motion and some discussion from the Planning Commission.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I make a motion, we grant final approval for Cold Waters Meadows subdivision, phase 3, located approximately 900 east, 2200 north, under conditions in the staff report are met.
Okay, does anyone want to second Commissioner Barker's motion?
I'll second.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go Go ahead, Commissioner Nancaro.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Before any vote, I would encourage discussion on the item.
Just to clarify, I believe it was stated final approval, but I wasn't certain. Is that the motion?
Could you clarify your motion, Commissioner Barker?
Yes, it is.
So the motion's for final approval, and that's still seconded by Commissioner Nancaro.
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. Okay, as I looked at this application again, as was stated that it's an administrative item, I'm of the opinion and that administrative items are our job to prove if the applicant has demonstrated that it conforms to our standards, and I see that it has, given the conditions of approval that are on there. The lot sizes meet or super exceed the minimums, and I would support approval of this myself. Other comments?
I agree with that. I think everything looks in line. It looks really good.
Okay, any dissenting vote, comments, any concerns? Okay, given the lack of further discussion, let's put this up to a vote. Commissioner Nancaro, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas is excused, Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes, and the motion passes. Okay. On to item number 8, which is a public hearing, discussion and action regarding a special exception for an extended cul-de-sac length at the Majors Mini Farm located approximately 100 west and 3050 north, presented by Brandon Bell.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. So this is also an administrative, well, actually, I think, yeah, so this is, we're approving this as part of a subdivision. There's a subdivision that's been proposed and received preliminary approval. It's the Major Mini Farm subdivision. It's a 3-lot subdivision, and it's located in an infill environment around 100 west and just to the south of 3100 north. Sorry, I got that wrong. It's around Loman View and in that area. The maximum cul-de-sac length for subdivisions is 600 feet unless they apply for a special exception. And that 600 feet is measured from the center of the cul-de-sac to the center of the intersection of the connecting street. And the applicants may apply for a special exception of a length of up to 750 feet. There's a number of criteria that they have to that has to be met and be determined by the Planning Commission and the City Council to have been met. And so there's a list of 6 of them. We'll go through each of them at a time, and then staff will one at a time, and then staff will give a commentary on that, on each of them. And according to our ordinance, all of the criteria of these 6 criteria need to have been met in order to qualify for a special exception. So the first is the maximum cul-de-sac length with a special exception extension is 750 feet. The city staff comment on that is that the city engineer has measured the cul-de-sac length at just under 648 feet. If the subdivision is not granted the exception, the length of the cul-de-sac would need to be reduced by about 48 feet. And on a related note, as the applicant's been working towards final approval for the subdivision design, they've indicated that there may be a change in the length of the subdivision by a few feet, of the cul-de-sac. Staff recommendation is that if the special exception is recommended to the City Council to be approved, that any motion by the Planning Commission specify that adjustments to the length of the cul-de-sac may be made as part of the and still be covered by the special exception, so long as it's within the maximum length of a cul-de-sac with a special exception. The second criteria is that there is no reasonable opportunity for connecting to the adjoining street network at this time. If connectivity to an adjoining property can be made in the future, a development agreement is required specifying the conditions and timing of the improvement. In other words, providing for a fire access road or a right-of-way dedication. Staff is of the opinion that, and this is staff's comment, that with the existing home that's already in place to the north of the subdivision, there's not a reasonable opportunity for the road to go through to 3100 North. Any connection furthermore would be to a residential street, whereas connections to arterials should be the higher priority. The Planning Commission should determine if they believe there is a reasonable opportunity for a road to go through at this time. And the property to be subdivided, the next criteria is that the property to be subdivided is an infill and surrounded by developed subdivisions. The application, the staff comment on this is that the application meets this requirement. The property is surrounded by existing single-family development. And the next criteria is that the maximum acreage of the subdivision to be served is 5 acres. Staff comment on this is that the application meets this requirement. The area of the property in this proposed subdivision is less than 5 acres. If a special exception, and the next criteria is that if a special exception is granted, connectivity to trails and pedestrian walkways may be required by the Planning Commission after considering a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Department. Staff comment on this is that there's no required trail in this area as part of the trails master plan. And then the final criteria is that if a special exception is granted, the number of lots on the cul-de-sac may be up to 20 as approved by the Planning Commission. This application proposes far less than 20 lots. And so the ordinance also specifies that the city council may require conditions such as will, in its judgment, secure substantially the objectives of the standards or requirements of these regulations. The Planning Commission may recommend any condition it feels is relevant to the approval of the special exception. If the special staff comment on this is that if the special exception is recommended to the city council, the Planning Commission should determine if there are any conditions that they believe will secure the objectives of the special exception regulations and include those conditions in their recommendation to the council. So considerations that the Planning Commission might want to review are: does the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? And does the special exception request comply with the proposed special exception code? The general plan map calls for this property to be developed as residential low density, and the subdivision that this relates to, again, was granted previously preliminary approval. It was determined in a prior meeting to meet the requirements of the applicable North Ogden City ordinances with some conditions of approval. Comments relating to the subdivision application were given at that prior meeting as a separate agenda item. There are some minor design changes being proposed as part of final approval that would extend lot 2 to 3100 North. And there wouldn't be allowed to have any drive access, and they should eliminate the drive approach, or comments that were made yesterday as we reviewed, as we were made aware of some potential design changes. Let's see. And staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission review the above criteria and determine if the application meets all of the required conditions listed above for a special exception to allow an extension of the cul-de-sac length, and make a recommendation whether to grant the special exception to the city council, or sorry, recommend the special exception to the city council, including any recommended conditions of approval. And that staff finally recommends that if the special exception is recommended to the city council, that any motion specify that adjustments to the length of the cul-de-sac may be made so long as they're within the maximum length permitted with a special exception. I think that covers all my comments. Does the commission have any questions for me?
Procedurally, would you like us to analyze the 6 points? Because to get a special exception, it has to satisfy the 6 criteria. Would you like to us to analyze those individually, or are you okay with the collective analysis of them collectively? I know that's kind of up to us, but
I think
you're more experienced here.
Yeah, I do think that that's your call. I think if the only suggestion that I would make is if there's anything that sticks out as not meeting the requirements, maybe discuss those specifically. And if not, you can just keep it general. That would be one way to approach it.
I agree with that, Commission. So when we grant a special exception, something like this, we have to say that it meets the 6 criteria. Yeah, I think if we feel that one doesn't meet, let's address that specifically. Else, I think we can just state whether we feel it meets those 6 criteria. I think that'll be more concise.
As I was reading through those 6 criteria and that, I didn't have any problems with it. It's just, I'm glad you brought up the comments of, at this time, there's no other way to, get interest into there. And that term always bugged me, at this time. What happens down the road, say 5, 6 years, there is a time? Does that change? That term always bugged me. I'm not quite sure how to handle it.
Well, let's save that discussion for our discussion phase of this. We have a public hearing first.
Okay.
Then would follow our discussion, and then an action. So we're Commissioner Barker, I'm happy to address that. I think we saved that for later. Any questions for Brandon prior to opening the public hearing? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing, or do we need a motion for that?
No, you just declare it open.
Oh, I declare the public hearing open.
I don't see any hands raised.
Yeah, let's give him a minute.
Oh,
Okay, we have one.
Ivan Barker, will you state your name and address?
Ivan Barker, 177 West, 3325 North Ogden. I just wanted to state, back in the 1990s, when I was on the commission, we talked over this same road, whether it could go through or should be a cul-de-sac. There was one commissioner then, it was Dennis Taylor. He was adamant that they go through. The rest of us, really didn't matter a whole lot to us. So we kind of went with Dennis then to stop the road. So nothing's been done in all this time. In the meantime, I've noticed the high school kids do much, much less driving down those roads down to Alberta to go home. Instead, they go on 3100 to the traffic light and then turn and go down on Washington or 450 East, I guess it is there. I'm talking with some of the neighbors that live on that street just below this proposed cul-de-sac or whatever she's saying. They've always been wanting it to be a cul-de-sac, and say I, for one, would have no heartburn at all, whether it's 50 feet or 100 feet longer than that 600. It's not that big a deal. Just be nice to have that area cleaned up instead of getting cars in there turning around or just driving through the neighbors of Jenny's yard up there and tracking mud all over. I don't know if it's going to be a hammerhead or a regular cul-de-sac. I guess I really don't have any say or cares one way or the other there. Just be whether the garbage dump trucks or the fire trucks, that be up to them maybe which that they would prefer. So But that's, I'd say let's get it shortened up and, or not shortened, but just get it finished up and asphalted so we can get on with life. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just to give a little context to some of the things you touched on. The design was laid out in a preliminary approval that was done a few months ago, and it was a hammerhead at the time, and still is. I think at that time we had a public comments that asked for us to walk through the special exception process like this, so that everything was kind of tied up in a nice little bow, and there was nothing kind of dangling left up to any interpretation. So that layout was a hammerhead and was approved preliminarily and back then. So it's kind of in the documents that you can get online here. I don't know if you had a chance to review those, but thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, we'll pause just a second. If in the absence of any further comments, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
That second by Alan Lunt?
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Lunt. Okay, the public hearing's closed. So discussion from the Planning Commission. I reiterate what I said. I feel like this was a cleanup from a prior approval. I feel like the 6 requirements for exception have been met and demonstrated by the applicant. And furthermore, as was stated in our previous public comment there, I think it actually enhances a vacant lot and furthers the city. So I'm in support of this in general.
Commissioner Mason, I have no problem with it. I agree with that. I just don't understand the terms at this time, how that applies. Either it's okay or it's not okay. I haven't understood why we put at this time in there. I can't remember.
Are you referring, Commissioner Barker, to the clause where it said that at this time the road cannot extend to 3100 because there's a home in the way, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I mean, my comment to that would be that land development's constantly in flux. At this time, I do think it is impossible to put a road to 3100 because there's a home there. That home may not always be there.
Right.
As we've seen on Washington Boulevard, things change, right? And so I support the wording of it this time because I think that describes the situation.
Okay, that's good.
That's one man's opinion. So.
Well, yeah, it makes sense that home goes away someday. And the road may go through there, and it may not.
With the hammerhead design, it wouldn't cause a problem if that were to happen either. But
I think that's
Yeah,
helpful to have oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
I think it's helpful to answer that question like that in a public forum too, because that may be a question that others would have. And Commissioner Mason, I think that's a very clear example. Another thing that was brought up that maybe we should just really briefly discuss was the comments about fire trucks and garbage trucks. It seems to me that the fire trucks would be able to pull down the cul-de-sac, and that, but I don't want to speak for the fire, city fire representatives on that, but it seems like that would be fine. And it seems like the garbage truck, I don't know if it's going to be, they'll wheel the garbage all the way down to the road so the garbage truck doesn't have to turn around, or I don't know what that would be, but it seems like it's not bad to briefly discuss that.
Well, I would assume that I haven't talked to the applicant about this, but I would assume that the applicant doesn't want a hammerhead, but has to comply with that very thing. I mean, just because it's kind of odd, right? So we're going to have a road that's going up and then a little jot that kind of comes and kind of makes a little mini corner lot out of the applicant's lot. I'm assuming that isn't ideal for the applicant, but it satisfies the garbage and the fire truck turnaround because they can kind of, and we discussed this in a previous meeting, where they can kind of make a 3-point turn to turn around and come back. And so I'm satisfied that the hammerhead, where not ideal, it helps to that point. in my opinion.
Sounds great.
I think
Yeah.
that's why we have that, why we have those in the ordinance to allow for that. And so that's kind of been predefined.
Great.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, from our previous discussion, which was pretty detailed, you know, it seems to me that right now there is a road there that ends it sort of in a dead end dirt patch. That road is going to be there whether the end of it is improved into a cul-de-sac or not. So the fact that this design and this subdivision plan, you know, improves that whole end of it and allows for, you know, not only a more improved road, but I don't believe that there is a reasonable alternative to provide a connection anywhere, clearly not to 3100. So, you know, if we didn't approve this, I think it would just remain the same length of road with a dirt turnaround at the end. So I think this is actually a great plan for the city and, you know, improves that particular area and that the end of that particular street. I'm not sure that there are any other good solutions to it.
Further comments or discussion? So I'm Brandon, this is a question for you. Procedurally, are we making a recommendation to the city council for the cul-de-sac length exemption and a final approval of the subdivision?
Just a recommendation for the special exception, one way or the other.
So we don't have final approval of the subdivision in there?
No, that will be considered at a future meeting. The design is being finalized on the subdivision. So this is relating to the special exception only. And which is one reason why I noted that if you do make a motion recommending it, that you include that the exception cover any adjustments to the length of the cul-de-sac as they finalize the design.
Okay.
And while I remember, I did check the TRC notes while you were discussing this, and it does have the fire marshal's approval, the hammerhead design. I know someone brought up that issue.
Okay, so what we're looking for here is a recommendation to the city council, who has final say in this matter.
Well, I believe that the criteria has been met, that it meets all the required conditions for the special exceptions to allow an extension of the cul-de-sac length. So I make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council to grant the special exception, including any recommended conditions of approval that were listed above, but specifically that adjustment to the length of the cul-de-sac may be made so long as that is within the maximum length permitted within the special exception.
I'll second.
Very eloquently stated.
Yes,
Okay,
it
we have
was.
a motion and a second. Any further discussion before I call for a vote? Okay, let's vote on this motion. Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas, were you present enough to give a vote?
Yes, I heard about halfway through the public hearing, so I vote yes.
Okay, Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
and Commissioner Nancaro.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So it's unanimous recommendation to the city council. Okay, since Commissioner Thomas is back, technically he can leave this meeting. I would ask that he'd be handing it over back to me. When Commissioner Thomas, you have an item on tonight's agenda, do you not?
Is that the next item?
Are you the next item? Why don't I just keep the gavel here for a while, which
Yeah,
doubles as a
there you
back
go.
pressure. Okay. Okay, item number 9 would be discussion and action regarding final approval. Oh, Commissioner Thomas, before we move into this, it was stated at the first of the meeting that you would not be an active participant except as an applicant. So you'd have your applicant time to speak and your final rebuttal as applicant, but you would not participate in the discussion. You're okay with that, I assume?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, item 9, again, is discussion and action regarding the final approval for North Oaks Cove subdivision, phase 17, located approximately 3625 North, 850 East, which contains 5 lots and will be presented by Rob Scott.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission and audience. This particular item is, again, an administrative item, and it's for the final approval of the North Oaks Cove subdivision, phase 17, which contains 5 lots. The property is a little over 13 acres. The zoning is HP2. And the background on this is that the subdivision was approved preliminarily back in February. And also at that same time, you'll recall that there was a concurrent rezone petition. The city council approved that on February 9th. So the property is in fact zoned HP2. So in the staff report, I noted that there was a technical review committee made back in December. We have a revised report from our city engineer dated March 11th. The HP2 zone requires minimum lot sizes of 12,500 square feet on interior lots. Holy cow, let's try that again. 12,500 square feet on interior and on corner lots. The lots in this proposed subdivision have been verified to meet the required square footage and lot width requirements. If you'll remember that there was a fair amount of discussion with respect to the future extension and connection up to Mountain Road, that design has been incorporated. Lot 5 has been reduced in size and no longer fronts onto Mountain Road. And a recorded agreement is required for the 3050 North Road extension. So basically what it'll need to do is to identify the timing and the guarantee as to how that is going to proceed. So that'll be something that will be negotiated between the applicant and planning staff and our city attorney. There's also the redesign. There's now only one double fronted lot, lot 4. And we do have a requirement, this was discussed last time, that there will need to be a fence along the boundary with Mountain Road. The fence can be constructed either at the time of building permit or with the Mountain Road improvements. And as we previously identified, we're going to be having a field trip and we'll be talking about some options for that streetscape cross section for Mountain Road as part of our field trip that's coming up. So Commissioner Thomas, you probably didn't hear, but the Planning Commission would like to go and do that on the 31st of March, since we have a 5 Wednesday month. And hopefully you're available and your vehicle's available. Anyway, so next are the Planning Commission conditions of approval. We've listed those as the requirements of the engineer's report, technical review committee letter, and the geotechnical report, and that's required to be put on the plat, and that's complete. I've noted that. The will serve letter for secondary water and sanitary sewer, those are they will be forthcoming. They just need to get to us prior to recording. The applicant is required to add a 6-foot tall fence in the rear yard of lot 4, either at the time of building permit or Mountain Road improvements. So we have a summary of Planning Commission considerations. Does the subdivision meet the requirements of the city? Is the proposal consistent with the general plan as was reviewed by the Planning Commission as part of their recommendation for the rezone? It was determined that this area is in the hillside neighborhood and that it does is consistent with the general plan. So staff recommends that Planning Commission grant final approval of the North Oaks Cove subdivision phase 17, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report. And I'll be happy to answer questions, Chair.
I don't know if this should be asked later during when we have a discussion or now. You talked about the fence, the timing of it. Is that something we decide as a planning commission now, or is that just whenever they decide to do it?
It's up to you. You can make a requirement as to the timing on it. Staff recommendation is leave it up to the applicant.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner Barker. Are there other questions for Mr. Scott? If not, I'd invite the applicant to address us with anything he chooses.
All right, thank you. This is Eric Thomas, 3588 North, 875 East. As you can see, you know, we've met everything we asked on, we discussed on the preliminary approval. I don't think there's anything really else. Really, I guess if there's any questions for me, to make the commission aware of one reason why that 3550 road as it extends to Mountain Road is being deferred in an agreement later is because the engineers are concerned as Mountain Road gets designed, that needs to be the determining factor of an elevation and not a secondary road like this. And there's a chance when Mountain Road gets built that this road, the slope of this road would have to change to accommodate where Mountain Road is. So the plan is to form that agreement and defer that construction of the extension of 3550 until Mountain Road is built. So then it can match up to the proper elevation. So other than that, I don't know if there's any
So
other
are funds being
questions
held
for
in
me.
escrow, Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, it will be part of that development agreement to hold that. Those improvements will be part of the escrow agreement for the whole subdivision, but they'll just be, no construction will take place until Mountain Road gets built.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our applicant comments. Do we have any public comments about this?
I don't see any hands.
Seeing anyone? Okay, pausing just a second. Okay. So we've heard from the applicant. We've had our technical description from Mr. Scott. As far as discussion, I'm completely in favor of not building that road to nowhere right now. It serves no purpose. It serves nothing. And furthermore, it's just going to need to be redone at the time that that's developed up there anyway. So I couldn't support that idea more. I'm glad the applicant's willing to hold the funds in escrow to make sure that that's done. But the actual building of it, I think it would just be a waste of asphalt. And it's just going to deteriorate until that's developed. So other comments on the lot layout?
I want to say thanks to Commissioner, he's not commissioner in this case, applicant Thomas. I made a typo and it is 3550. So I've changed that in the report.
Thank you. So noted. Again, since I'm the only one speaking and I like my own voice, I believe the applicants demonstrated compliance with our code, and I believe this item should be approved.
I'll second that.
Well, that wasn't a motion, but
Oh,
I was gonna. Would you like to make one?
I'm not good enough at that yet.
I'll make a motion that we grant final approval of the North Oaks Cove subdivision phase 17, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report.
Can I second that one? Is that how it works now?
Motion's been approved or submitted by Commissioner Nancaro and seconded by Commissioner Johnson Webb. I almost called you Commissioner Johnson.
That works too.
Okay, further discussion before I call for a vote. Okay, Commissioner Arner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas will not vote on this. Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
yes, and I'm a yes. Motion passes. Okay, item 10 on our agenda is a public hearing. Technically, this could be turned back over to Eric for the majority of the meeting. Commissioner Thomas?
Go
how would that
ahead.
proceed?
Go ahead, Commissioner Mason.
Okay, I'll continue to
I
conduct.
just need to, yeah, I apologize. I got in the meeting late today. I had a phone call I had to take care of, so.
Okay, well, we're glad you're with us now. So I'll continue to conduct the meeting. Item number 10 is we move into the legislative items of our agenda where we have a little more discretion. And item number 10 is a public hearing, consideration, and recommendation regarding rezoning property approximately 281 East Pleasant View Drive from residential RE20 to an R3 multifamily. And Rob Scott will be presenting that to us.
Thank you, Chair, again, and planning commissioners and audience. We have received an application from the applicant is Sockeye Management, with the John Hanson being the agent. As stated, this property is approximately 281 East Pleasant View Drive, and the request is to rezone this property from suburban residential RE20 to multifamily residential R-3. Their property consists of about 6.35 acres, and the property to the north, we have a combination off of Longman View Drive. Across the way is residential and some vacant properties. To the east is commercial and institutional. The old Public Works facility is to the east. To the south, there's straddles some residential and commercial. And to the west, there's some residential and agricultural lands. So this again is a legislative decision. And as such, the legislative decisions, the criteria for making a decision regarding legislative matters require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. So the applicant for this request, there's just a few things by way of background that I want to further emphasize. The properties currently have there's a horse barn and some fields. So for the most part, it's agricultural fields that are there, well, along with that horse barn. The request is a precursor to a subdivision and a site plan application for a townhome project. Those two items would come back to the Planning Commission in a future meeting to consider those items. The concept plan, and I think we have that in Exhibit B. Maybe we could go to that, Lynn, and people could look at that as I describe what is being proposed. So I don't know if you can shrink. Yeah, there we go. You see the entire project there. So the project consists of 3 unit sizes. There are 13 buildings, a total of 84 townhomes. There's 6 units, 5 units, and 2 4-unit buildings. The applicant has provided 3 building elevation examples, and I think that Lynn has those right there, so you can kind of see what those would be approval at the time of site plan review, but the applicant did want to give an example of the types of units that he's considering as part of this project. So the density in this project is a little over 13 units per acre. And also, if you go back up to the map, you'll see that 300 East is extended as part of this project in the location where pretty much it's in order to avoid taking out any homes in that, that's pretty much the last location for that extension to occur. So I've given a fair amount of discussion with respect to how this project conforms to the general plan. The general plan map calls for this area to be developed as downtown mixed use. And also there is one small portion of the project that has a small single family. as we discuss these designations and what have you, that's one of the reasons why we have a general plan. It is just that, it's general, and that we have the opportunity to see the compatibility of how these things fit together. So the project is on the edge of downtown, and where it transitions to single-family neighborhoods. And that's the reason why we have a review process for the site plan and for the subdivision at a later date to ensure that those things take place. There's also, as part of our general plan, you'll remember we had some discussion about the fact that the Stump property going to the west, there is consideration for a park along Pleasant View Drive. The city council's had some discussion relative to that. And this is a good opportunity when this goes before the council that they would be able to further discuss whether or not that is going to take place and to the extent of it. So that would be an opportunity for that to take place. The next thing is that there's some goals within our general plan that would apply to this project. The first one is our goal is to increase housing quality and variety. So some of the discussion points are encourage adequate housing types which accommodate life cycle transitions and changing population norms. So as you well know, commissioners, there's been a lot of discussion about the various housing types and that we should be doing some diversification from our standard single family homes. Next, establish and adhere to high quality building design standards. I don't want to rebeat that to death, but that's where the site plan review comes into play with the Planning Commission. There's a couple strategies. Implement mixed use plans for North Ogden downtown and Southtown centers, and locate higher density housing in or near the downtown is one of the things that's talked about. There's some significant connectivity issues here. That's hence the extension of 300 East to the north. And there's one other discussion that I think is appropriate. Such uses, when we talk about residential uses in this area, should include small lot residential and medium density concepts for this particular area. The other thing that we review when we take a look at zone changes, we look at our zoning and land use policies. And the land use policies are there to help the Planning Commission and also the City Council evaluate the appropriateness of the zone changes as they come forward. So that's not to mean that every one of these guidelines has to be met, but they need to be met to the extent that it satisfies the project being something that is going to be an asset and be a compatible project. So let me run through those general guidelines. The first one is that there should be a definitive edge established between types of uses. And in this case, the specific guideline talks about that collector streets can be used as one of those edges. And that's the case here. We have Pleasant View Drive on the south and Lowman View Drive on the north. The next one is that the zoning should reflect the existing use unless the property is in transition. And of course, that's exactly what's taking place. We're transitioning from agricultural lands to residential. The next one is where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. And collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. Again, that's sort of a repeat, but again, Lowman View Drive and Pleasant View Drive, those are collector streets. The next one is zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, and the project will all be zoned in one zone. There won't be any cross the zoning will not, it will align with the existing property lines. Sorry about that. Residential guidelines, avoid isolating neighborhoods. We don't believe that this is going to isolate any of the neighborhoods. It's going to be a further transition. Require excellence in design. Mentioned it several times now. A subdivision site plan review will be coming back to the Planning Commission. And then consider development agreements. There's not one being proposed at this time. If there gets to be something talked about with respect to the extension of the park or something like that, a development agreement might find its way into the discussion and be appropriate to consider. Lastly, what are a little summary of land use authority considerations? Is the proposal consistent with the general plan, and how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? So those would be things that you will want to consider, commissioners. So our staff recommendation is that you would conduct a public hearing and receive public comment, consider the general plan along with the rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council regarding the rezone from RE20 to R3. The Planning Commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan and recommend that the general plan be followed. And I know that's a little lengthy, but by the same token, this is an important consideration, and I'd be happy to answer questions, commissioners.
Rob, do you have the density requirements for the R3?
Yeah, it meets within that. The 13 is within.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have that, if you have those.
I'm not sure what you're asking for.
Well,
What's the?
So I know we're at 13 units per acre with okay. So what we're not approving a site plan. We're approving zoning, but the potential site plan on there would be at 13 units per acre, right? But
Correct.
what is the density requirements if you have them for the R3? What I'm asking is how many residential units per acre are the maximum allowed in the R3 designation?
I have that somewhere, but I'll have to look for it.
Thank you. And while you're there, could you grab the R2 as well? And so it's for comparison.
I may not have. Well,
I can go get my book.
the key to the difference between the R3, R4, and R2 is somewhat limited in the number of dwelling units that are included on a given parcel. So I need to look that up as far as the R2. One of the things that the maximum you can have is as an 8-plex. So medium density is between 6 and 18 dwelling units per acre.
Okay. Do we have other questions for Mr. Scott about the presentation and the proposal? Okay.
I think since we're only worried about rezoning it, he's answered it pretty well.
Yeah, it's hard not to think about when you see units on the map. It's hard not to think about that and to think about the word rezoning. But that's a good illustration of what potentially would lay down on with this zoning proposal.
So Commissioner, R2, basically you're allowed to have duplexes. That's the biggest thing that you can have, and it requires that there be 12,000 square feet per duplex.
Thank you. Okay, other questions for Mr. Scott? Okay, I believe this is a public hearing. So this time, I guess we'd invite the public to give comments on this, including the applicant. We do have a hand raised already.
Brenda, please state your full name and address.
Brenda Ashdown, 193 East Pleasant View Drive. This is strictly a personal opinion. I live in this area, across the street, a little kitty corner. I would prefer to see this in low density housing. I live between two subdivisions, which are single families. Then on the west of us, we've got the 84 unit senior living. I'm just feeling like we're being overwhelmed with multiple dwellings. So my personal opinion is that it not be zoned for this high of density. Thank you.
That's not in the plan.
Thank you. Was there additional comment there, ma'am? Or was that background? Thank you.
We have Ivan Barker. Go ahead,
So
Ivan.
Ivan Barker, I live 177 West, 3325 North. I wish I could be a commissioner on this so I could vote. I really wish I could vote because it'd be a big resounding no. That's way too high a density for that area. I can maybe be convinced to go with an over 55 deal and, smaller lots or individual homes, but there's some really nice homes along to the north and to the west of this. I'm just really, this high density, I would really strongly urge to back off the density size. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So Chair, I think you should be allowing for the applicant to speak first.
Yeah, excuse me on that. I kind of implied that. So do we have our applicant here to speak?
We do, John Hanson.
Okay, my apologies, Mr. Hanson, for not allowing you to go first.
Yeah,
So-
1165 West, 4000 North in Pleasant View. Excuse me. In trying to figure out what the needs of the city and what might fit into that property, where it's so close to the downtown, I came up with the idea, let's just not build those boring townhomes that you can see down Washington Boulevard that have been put up, but let's add a little bit of character to these structures. And if you look at those drawings that I did, the ones that have the rear load, they have a little white fence in front of them and a nice front door. And I just think I would like to make this just a real appealing project. Yeah, Lynn's moving those up. Can you go a little higher, Lynn? Yeah, something like this, where we really present it as almost a single family home. So that's what I'd like to do. I don't want just straight fronts. I'd like some pop outs, and I have some other plans going with the builder that I think would satisfy the this planning commission, the city council, that this just is not a regular townhome project. I want to make it very friendly. I want to fit in. I don't want to hurt the neighbors across the street. The maximum height these can be is 28 feet. And across the street, I think Mr. Freeman's property, I think he's 2-story. He's about probably 28 or higher. And also Roger Stevens across the street to the north is about the same height. This property gradually slopes to the south, so I don't think it'll greatly impact their views. Understanding that any building will affect someone when you've lived so long just looking at open property. The other thing I'd like to just bring up is that in the state of Utah, and it's just unbelievable, along the Wasatch Front, there's 1,700 homes for sale, total, 1,700. Normally in the market, there are like 18,000 homes for sale. we are now short 55,000 homes in the state of Utah. I mean, that's just staggering. And what's more frightening than that is the price of these homes have just gone out of sight. And if we get a listing on a home really anywhere in Weber County, most of them are going to be above 400,000. There are 10 to 12 offers on that home the first 5 hours. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my career. Builders now, because of the shortage of material, the bigger builders, Visionary or Homes and Homes or whoever you want, they'll only commit 3 homes a month, and they won't commit a price because of the inflation that's going on. And what's happened is it's just left these young families destitute. They're moving in with dad and mother, and I'm trying to create a product that's really close to 270 to 300 that has some good quality and some good architecture that some of these young families can get into and not feel like they're in an apartment, but they're in a nice area. So that's kind of the vision that I have, and I'd be excited to work with staff and them and the Planning Commission on coming up with some real nice designs for this area. Also, I drive to North Ogden every day, and now that you've cut off Pleasant View Drive, I turn and go behind Lee's on 300 East. I can't go left, and I don't know what the plans are. I've heard they might want to shut down Pleasant View Drive, but this would sure be a nice corridor going to the north up through this project for 300 East. I'd also like to work with the parks in the city to somehow tie this project in with trails or I don't know how I'm not very creative with that, but tie it into the park so that it could be a friendly downtown atmosphere. So that's what I wanted to come up with. I just didn't want regular townhomes. I'd like them to have some architectural features. So this particular townhome was the one we're looking at is built by Homes and Homes. They're one of the premier builders in Utah. And I did a project with them in Layton, and I was very, very pleased, Gordon and Fairfield, of what they did. So that's my thinking on it, and where the general plan calls for this. I think it's a great transition and should provide some housing for younger families or people that can't pay $400,000 to $500,000 for a house. So I'm trying to provide a product that people can be happy with and try to get the payment down. So that's my speech.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Okay, we are still in a public hearing. My apologies for taking that out of order. That was our applicant. We've heard from the public. We have another hand.
They've only signed in with their last name. We'll ask them to give their full name and address.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Jerry Shaw at 2281 North, 525 East in North Ogden. One technicality, you have listed the proper address of this place as 281 East Pleasant View Drive. It's actually 281 East Lowman View Drive. It's bordered on the south by Pleasant View Drive. Just to provide some background, this farm, I would love to keep it as a farm, but no one has come along and offered to buy it. It has been in my family since 1911, 110 years. My grandfather raised chickens, distributed eggs on a daily basis, and milk from his cows on a daily basis. Everything was fresh, nothing frozen because he didn't have refrigeration to do that. He passed it on to his two sons. I purchased 50% interest from my uncle. My dad and I owned it till he died, and now I own it. I have no heirs that would be interested in this property. I'm sure, and I haven't received a dispensation that would say to me I could keep it forever. So I feel it is time to sell it. And I think this is the right thing to do for it. I know a lot of my neighbors say that don't sell it. We love how your property looks, your farm. I've put my heart and soul into it. And I would love to keep it as a farm, but not feasible. And I think with what Mr. Hanson proposed, we look forward to the opportunity to do something with it that would be pleasing for the city. This land has been commercial for many, many years. And it was changed. I don't know when it was changed. Didn't receive any notice of it, but it always was commercial. And I think it's the access to Leeds Market and other downtown areas would be very beneficial. It has 3 sources of water on it, 2 underground waters that come under Lowman View Drive, enter onto the farm, and I gather that water into 3 different ponds, and it goes out under Pleasant View Drive into the canal. Second source is Pine View water, which is on it. And a third source, it has a beautiful 140-foot deep 6-inch well that has similar water to what the stump has. I've had it tested. The water is 2 parts per million of bacteria. So a nice little stream could be put through the property. It would be beautified and make things even more pleasant. That water that comes under the road was filed on by my grandfather in 1940. So we know it is at least 81 years that water's been running there. So it's a wonderful piece of property. And I think it would be very beneficial to the people who want to go shopping there or live there and find a peaceful area in which to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Our public hearing remains open.
I don't see any more hands.
Okay, given the visibility here, let's pause for just a second. We do have a hand as one of the panelists.
John Call.
Commission, sorry, I thought I'd just wait till the end of the public hearing and just remind you that the city council did kind of put the word out on the street. They weren't going to be considering rezones. That doesn't mean that the group shouldn't make a decision and pass a recommendation on. It's the applicant's right to, take their application all the way through the city council. But just so you're aware that I don't think the general plan steering or advisory committee has finished their recommendation yet. So the applicant may have a few hurdles with it at the city council level, just so you're aware.
Great, thank you. Public hearing remains open. Okay, I guess I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor by voice vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I want the public hearing to remain open. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Okay, time for our discussion. Obviously, this is a piece of land that tugs on our heartstrings. It's highly visible. I've walked by it since I was a little boy. I'm very familiar with it, as I'm sure you all are. I recall and I can let anybody else speak that has thoughts, but maybe I'll start. I recall a similar request that was put on the other side of over nearer to the golf course down Pleasant View Drive. And it was a very, very similar request. And the applicant at that time was a smaller piece of land, and the applicant wanted similar housing. And at the time, I remember recommending that we do that because it abutted some high density housing right there with a development agreement with the city, which would control and not just allow the traditional fourplex to come in. It would allow, or it would constrain that down to some real high end developments. And I thought that would have been a nice addition to that area, actually. However, the city council at that time, and there's that word again for you, Commissioner Barker, the city council at that time disagreed with that and really wanted to keep that high density out of there. So with this particular property, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I have conflicting thoughts because the one hand, where it abuts a professional development building like that dentist office or whatever there on Lomanview Drive, and obviously kitty corner from the ice cream or the frozen whatever Hawaiian ice place and the print shop and whatever the old public works building is. That seems like a nice place to start to transition into some high density. On the other hand, it is directly across the street from a number of single family houses. And it does seem to be an abrupt transition from those single houses to having fourplexes, as high end as they may be. So I have conflicting thoughts on this. Just given the existing development that's there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Rick. I was having the same thoughts you're having. I'm glad you said it. Going having the same type of conflicting thoughts going on. Where the surrounding houses are there already, then putting that in, but also still the location and Lee's and our market and Smith's all out there available. I'm having a tough time here.
I'm pretty much echoing what both of you have just said too. I've been going back and forth in my head. So my heart is leaning a little more like no, but I don't really have a great reason. I mean, other than the things that you guys stated. And I know that John Hanson does very nice work and all that. I'm not worried about any of that, but is there any other place that really has apartment buildings right across from homes?
I believe the applicant would say these probably aren't apartment buildings. I don't see a management complex or anything in there.
Well, okay.
High density, I think.
I said the wrong term.
Multifamily is probably a better term.
Does anyone know the approximate value of the homes in that area? I mean, just an average, because Mr. Hanson mentioned his units are, I want to say he said around 300 or so, maybe, I can't remember. He said, I don't know if he said 280 to 320 or what he said, but because you usually don't want to build down too much in an area in that sense. I don't know. I'm a little.
Yeah, I always have, mixed feelings whenever we try to balance this really desperate need for more affordable housing, throughout Utah, throughout the country, really. But when you look at this type of development, it truly does meet that need. And if we look at our general plan, specifically, it does call for sort of like mixed use or multifamily, allowable in this area. But then you have to weigh it against whenever we start talking about, we want to build these buildings so it has the look and the feel of a single family residential area. to do development agreements. So the design of it has the look and feel of single family residential. And whenever I hear us talking about that, bells go off that says perhaps then the appropriate zoning is single family residential if we want the look and the feel of that in the area. But no matter where we sort of would look at places in the city of North Ogden for this type of, more affordable multifamily units, nobody wants it next to them. Where's a good place? We're finding pockets throughout the city to build these that do seem appropriate. And let's face it, they are highly popular and there's a huge demand for it. So it is always that tough balancing act. I mean, I will say that these look very nice. I would love to live there next to like the Lee's Market and this beautiful park and, all that stuff. But it is always a tough balance between, there are other neighbors that may not want that in the lot next to their house. And that's something that we're always going to have to face within the city.
I agree with you, Nicole. And it does seem like we also have a lot of, Prominence Point, everything's not finished. I mean, do we really think there won't be enough housing if we don't do this? I think maybe that is another aspect as well. Because yes, we want everybody to have a nice place to live in.
Great
But
discussion
is this
so
the
far.
only pocket, is it one of the only pockets left? If I could ask that, I don't know. I'm just throwing out my thoughts. I mean,
keep
I
going back to
don't
the
know
fact that
anybody who lives there or what the feel is, or I don't, I'm kind of speaking as a fool, I guess, in that sense, but
one of the principles that I'm batting around in my head is that the general plan has this as mixed use multifamily, right? So that's kind of been laid out already. Now, is it specifically have to be an R3, which is why I asked the question about the R2, right? And then this is where we have discretion. So the general plan is kind of guiding us in a direction in my head, right? And it's saying, hey, mixed use multifamily is here. On the other hand, we have these surrounding properties, and that's why I was kind of thinking R2 might be a solution, because we're lower density mixed use, and that might help some of the homeowners around feel better about that. That's kind of where I'm at with that. But what I'm hearing from some of these comments is that if we want it to look like single family, then it should be zoned single family.
Yeah, I have some comments. A couple of the things that I've heard discussed tonight, that kind of overarching things are, including from Mr. Hanson and Mr. Shaw, are most everyone here is saying this is a unique piece of land and we want to make it something that's nice. Mr. Hanson was talking about the architectural elements to it. And to me, that signals that this is an important piece of land for North Ogden. So I think this is an important decision. I think we also need to respect the rights of landowners and have a good plan where we can move forward with things like this. And boy, this is a tricky one because it is in an area where it touches different elements. It is a kind of a transition zone of sorts. And so with our current rules, how do we approach that? And, do any of these particular zones fit perfectly? I'm actually been flipping through them. I looked through them this week and I was like, I don't know that any of them fit perfectly. And so what do you do with something like that? And I'm not super familiar with the MPC zone, but that might be a thought. I'm not sure the acreage. I think I saw somewhere it needs to be at least 5 acres, which this does qualify for, but maybe, it's not as a typical big master plan community. So that's a little trickier, but, maybe along the northern part there, maybe there are some houses that are more in keeping with homes of that area. And maybe there's some commercial on the south side because that's more in keeping. And maybe there's some nice homes that have been presented in this presentation that have a higher density in the middle. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking aloud there of with a piece of land that it's kind of tricky, how as a governing body here of sorts, a recommending body, do we have some discussion that's productive for our beautiful city of North Ogden? How do we approach this in a positive and productive way so that this really critical piece of land takes a step in a positive direction? I mean, I heard Mr. Shaw talk about his family with this land. I think he's passionate about what this piece of property means to him. He's sharing intimate details with us that it's important. So I don't hear anyone here saying, let's just throw up a bunch of apartments, so to speak. Nobody's really saying that, but I don't know that we also have a solution. So thoughts, that's just my thoughts.
I'll share some of my thoughts. This is Eric. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The screen usually changes to who's talking. I didn't see. So I'm kind of along with I liked everybody's comments. This piece was highlighted years ago, back when we got a lot of public involvement with the charrette and all those things when we updated the general plan to be one of the designated areas in the city that we think that multifamily would work, because it's kind of that transition from the commercial of Lee's and all that area into single family. But I also think, and it's also critical because of the extension of 300, getting that through. And so, for those reasons, what my recommendation would be, I'll go ahead and make a motion and recommend that we recommend the zone change to R3 with the condition that the council enters into a development agreement to ensure that the concerns are met, that it's a quality project. Also, one thing of concern is there needs to be sure, I know it will have to happen in the development, but the city has a well right there on the city property, and there's a distance requirement that any housing or whatever has to stay away from that water source. So that can be addressed in the development agreement as well. But that gives, I think, all of us the best option to work with the developer for a quality project and the city, that it's not just a blanket zone that then, heaven forbid, something happens to John or the property goes somewhere else and somebody just comes in and slaps up whatever's allowed in the zone, that's a lesser quality. So I think with that stipulation that there is a development agreement adhered to that can help us meet some of those additional design and requirements that we want be met. So to shorten, I guess the recommendation is, my motion, recommendation to approve to an R3 zone with condition that a development agreement be entered into between the developer and the city, and the council can work out with some of those details as well, based on what they would like to see happen.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to second. We still are in discussion of this. I very much think the motion is headed in the right direction. There's some of the specifics I think I might disagree with. I was more leaning towards a similar thing with a development agreement, only with something maybe like an MPC zone or something like we did at Village of Prominence Point, which would give us some flexibility to maybe even put a single house. I guess the R3 would allow single homes if that was what the development agreement laid out. Is that your thought, Commissioner Thomas? Let's say we highlight one corner of this where we say, hey, this is surrounded by single family homes and it should be a duplex instead of a single family home even. Would the R3 zone give us that flexibility?
Yeah, I think it does. My personal opinion, especially on these smaller pieces, is I don't want to create a habit that we get into in the city of every time there's a multifamily or a project that we jump to that master plan community zone, because that really should be entailed for larger scale products and projects that can have commercial, different types of residential and all of those things in it. And so probably for that reason, I don't want to kind of start creating down that path that that's the go-to every time. I would rather keep it strictly residential and just, require a development agreement. So that way we can be vested in the quality of project that's going to go there, but yet it still is staying residential. And through the development agreement, the densities can be worked with. So I think.
Can I ask a question about that?
Uh-huh.
Would the development agreement with the R3 zone, since it is so close to Lee's, would that not allow them to do any commercial if they wanted to? I guess I'm kind of trying to understand the difference between those two.
I would probably defer to John. I believe the development agreement, if entered into, that becomes kind of that zone restriction. But John, would that hold true to an R3 zone, or would that really have to be a separate zone?
So it would have to become, so the development agreements, what it does is it requires you to comply with the zone. The reason the MPC zone has the flexibility is that in that zone, it specifically says the council can work with the requirements as part of the development agreement. The R3 zone doesn't allow that. So there wouldn't be any commercial allowed in the R3, but that doesn't mean the council couldn't say, we're going to zone 90% of it R3 and the other 10% we're going to zone commercial. So it can be accomplished in the same way, just it's a slightly different approach with the rezone.
So we could go ahead and do the zone as an R3, and then the city council could overrule that and change it to what you just said, John?
Right. So when you make a recommendation, that the city council can agree with it, they can deny it or disagree with it, or they can change it. So it is always contingent. The landowner, if they wanted to, I have seen it in the past where it'll go to the council and say, oh no, we're not going to rezone it to R3. We're going to rezone it to A5 with 5-acre lots. And the applicant will pull their application and say, no, you can't do that to me. So, so they don't have full control, but at the same time, they can work with the recommendation in the way that works best from their perspective.
I guess one other thing of note, I don't know if it needs to be added to the motion, but I'm under the assumption that the city council would address the zone in the development agreement once they have a recommendation from the general plan steering committee. So I guess I would add that to the motion, or amend the motion that be part of that, as well as the rezone. Finalization of the rezone doesn't take place until after the recommendation of the general plan steering committee, because I know this area is one of the areas of concerns that the committee's been addressing.
I'll second your amendment.
Oh, you're hurting me, because your motion's very close to something I would vote for, but it's not all the way there. But I guess what I would have liked to have seen in there was some more specific recommendations, maybe about. I think, Eric, if I were to have made that motion, I would have probably appended on there that, and maybe this is just up to the city council to say that, areas adjacent from existing homes, not have more than possibly a duplex or something like that. Maybe.
Well, the problem is what's the future plan to that area? I mean, because you look at one side of it and you've got a commercial building and the old city shops. The other side, you have 2 adjacent homes, but there's also some other property on the other side that is going to be looking to changing or trying to, because further down the road, you have the new city shops. So I don't feel like it's sandwiched enough that where you'd say you'd need a buffer of single family lots next to the property, but that's.
Yeah, it makes it so tricky where you've got you've got the commercial on one side and the fairly large homes on the other side.
It's just not big enough piece of property, in my opinion, where you could have, single family and multifamily to split. It's really, plus, trying to put this city road up through the middle of it. So
that makes complete sense.
Other thoughts? Remember, if you don't agree with the motion, I encourage you to vote no, and then we would have to find a new motion. I think I'm inclined to kind of agree with where the discussion's headed myself. Other thoughts?
No, I like the direction going.
Okay, I don't want to call for a vote till we got it all on the table.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to vote no, because it feels tricky. You know, it really does. I'm kind of with the thoughts of, I can see where the development agreement seems critical, but exactly how to execute on this really key piece of property that's going to actually set a tone for that area of the city is, yeah, I honestly, you know, I'm leaning towards voting no because I don't understand how that would, with the R3, it would execute to be something, and maybe that's just my lack of understanding, but that's where I'm sitting.
Well, Commissioner Webb, I'm considering voting. I think I've maybe changed my tone. I'm probably leaning towards a yes at this point because I think the development agreement protects and gets the city and the developer to a talking point to what they agree on, and I think we can enforce getting some density and you know, which is what the developer wants and the seller, I think, right? And then blending maybe some transition areas or some, at least a look and feel that isn't as harmful to the, and I say harmful because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Some people can look at density and find it beautiful, but that wouldn't be as you know, as offensive to some of the existing homeowners, I think. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'm not trying to convince you of anything, and I definitely encourage if you want to vote no, that is, we should never fall into groupthink here. Okay.
Yeah.
My other caveat is I really want Pleasant View Drive closed and the park expanded. And this, if we had this road to go through here, I think that pretty much puts that discussion to bed, in my opinion. But
yeah, that seems like a very important point for that area and the park to potentially expand. That seems like it could be very helpful.
So yeah, some things that we think they're nice with this property and saying, hey, how vital is that? But if this gives us that opportunity to officially close Pleasant View Drive and expand the park over there by Centennial Park, to me, that brings value. But that's something I've been trying to push and do for 5 years.
Yeah, that's a very helpful point that you just brought up. I think that's good. And I think part of the reason as I digest this that I'm leaning more towards a yes now is back to the discussion of, would it preclude them from being able to do some commercial stuff? Because clearly the developer wants some density and it makes sense as to why. But you know, the ability for the developer to maybe choose a piece of commercial, should the city council think that's beneficial, could be a nice part of them. And that was part of my reason for voting no, potentially voting no, was I didn't want to feel like it tied their hands for them to in turn be able to create the best possible area for our city. So I think I'm getting that a little bit better now. Thank you.
Hey, you know, I just want to, Commissioner Webb, I know that, you know, you're fairly new, but there's a reason there's 7 of us. And because we all have a vote. And if you don't feel comfortable with something, we won't, you know, we vote yes and no all the time. For us, it's not, you know, it's not like a personal thing. So if you vote your conscience, and we will absolutely support that. But it sounds like this particular issue from the comments, I mean, all of us are kind of, you know, have mixed feelings about it. So
yeah.
So don't ever feel bad if you're not comfortable with it. You vote exactly how you think.
I appreciate that. That's the kind of city I think we all want to live in. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Nancaro. That was well stated. And yeah, it feels sometimes in here that we think things need to be unanimous and that we all need to agree on something, and that's just not the case. And it doesn't, again, different opinions doesn't mean we're enemies or bad, right? And then no need to apologize.
It happens all the time. We respect each other's vote, and that's why there's 7 of us. So.
And to that extent, maybe we need to discuss in a future meeting if we should really lay our cards out on the table with I'm going to vote yes or I'm going to vote no. Because I'm just batting this around in my head and I end up just kind of talking out loud as I think through it.
Yeah.
So,
But I think sometimes it does help to hear why other people might vote no, and because you may not be thinking what they're thinking until they say it, then you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. So everybody has a different viewpoint, and I think we're very good about respecting each other's viewpoints, but sometimes it sways you one way or the other. And it sounds like some of us are really on the fence about this one, so.
okay, further discussion.
Well, I'll just say, originally I was going to say no until but the developer agreement got put into place. Or it can be, they can be controlled a little bit more. That kind of pushed me to the yes, just barely hanging on by my teeth where I'm at.
Okay, and I reminded the planning commission, this is a recommendation to the city council. So city council does have final say on what's going on here. They do take our recommendations seriously. They don't always agree with us, but they definitely take them seriously. Okay. In light of no further discussion, I'm going to call for a vote. Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes, by my teeth.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
by all of you, teeth. Never mind. Don't answer
Teeth
that.
and fingernails.
Commissioner Arner,
Can I abstain?
Is that a no? You
Um,
can feel free.
legal, John, can she abstain?
The answer is no.
Okay.
Okay,
Commissioner
I
Arner?
thought. I mean, I'm not for it, I'm not against it. So in certain ways, I guess I will leave it up to people in the city to really analyze it and do what's right. So I'll say yes.
You're a yes, and the
Ye-
development agreement puts you over the top. That's what I don't want to put words in your mouth. Excuse me. Commissioner Arner, I have you down as a yes. Commissioner
right.
Webb,
Yes, and I would say the development agreement is the thing that pushed me over the top.
okay, I'm a yes for the same reason. And initially, I thought I would be a no on this. So I've changed my mind a couple times on this tonight, and I do think this could be something really nice for the city. So I think we have an applicant who's willing to work with the city and get something nice. So that recommendation will go to the city council, and we'll move on in our agenda, which will bring us to item number 11, which is another public hearing. We could maybe fit a couple more in if we tried. Another public hearing. This one's a discussion and recommendation regarding a proposal to amend the city code to include the sensitive lands chapter, as has been discussed here. And Rob Scott will present that to us, the following, which will have a public hearing.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. As you well know, this has been a fairly long time coming with respect to this particular amendment to our code. And it is, in my estimation, one of the more significant amendments, because what it does is that it helps identify not only the specific things that need to be studied in our sensitive lands area, but it also defines how those studies are to occur. We currently have ordinances that identify a list of things that are to be studied, but they don't give the specifics that either help, that put the meat on the bone, so to speak, for either an applicant, for the applicant's designers, and or the city and our review team as well. So there's three parts to this particular amendment. And remember, first of all, that we have our existing chapter is chapter 25, it's called Development Constraints. And we are retaining that chapter in order to make sure that for the areas that are not covered by the sensitive lands overlay, that there still are those requirements to be addressed by these other properties as they go forward. So the second part of the amendment is that we are modifying some definitions, and those definitions primarily deal with topics of open space and parks and so forth. And then the third part, which is the biggest part of it, is the sensitive lands overlay. And it emphasizes public safety as the primary focus of this ordinance. And as such, it identifies not only the standards, but it also has a process. Now, as you well know, we are in the process of pursuing an overall review of our land use code. And as a part of that, there's going to be a consolidation of all of the process sections into one section. So this current ordinance has a fair amount of process within it. But those process sections, when we adopt the land use code, they will be removed and all incorporated into that other section. So that's kind of the overview of this. Now I want to, just a second here. I got to make sure I've got, pardon me, I need to, I've got 3 or 4 things that are open all at the same time, and I need to go to our sensitive lands file. So the ordinance itself, the Planning Commission has reviewed it on a number of occasions. And as a part of that review, the Planning Commission had given us the go-ahead to bring it to public hearing. This public hearing has been noticed, and we have a comment from Wasatch Civil representing Cami Marriott, which their development company owns a considerable amount of property up on this bench. And they have submitted a letter that we sent out earlier today. Lynn, are you in a position to pull that up?
I am.
And let's go there. They made 3 comments, and I'd like to just review those 3 comments with you. So the first comment, if you can just scroll down a little bit.
Let's see, where'd it go? I can't get it to scroll down.
Well, we just need to expand it so we can, there we go, so we can read it. So comment number 1 has to do with the percentage of slopes that this applies to. Now, the request is that there be consideration for going to higher slopes than 20%. Our current ordinance limits it to 20%, so we have not changed that. That's the way that we were given direction to do that. And as we look at the maps that show slope up on the north bench and that, if there are any slopes that are above 20%, they're very, very few. So that's our comment relative to the 20%. And you can read that, and you can further discuss whether or not you want to amend that or not. But I believe that the ordinance is consistent with existing policy and policy that's been around for many, many years. So the number 2 comment is one that we as a staff took a look at today, and we're going to recommend to you that this is 1127 for, let me get down there. It's actually I believe it's G, not B. I got to scroll down for myself so I can make sure I got it right. And what it does is it this particular one references our standards with regard to low impact design standards. And so the ordinance today has a sentence at the end that talks about on-site retention of 80% is required. We're recommending that sentence be struck. And that way we just reference the public works standards. The public works standards already talk about LID, if you remember. And so those standards are there. We don't need to, and this is actually, and talking to Lauren, we believe that that standard is one that probably should be taken out of this ordinance because it does somewhat conflict with our public works standards. So it would read, low impact design standards must be complied with as identified in the North Ogden City Public Works Standards, Chapter 19. So I think that resolves their concern. They're online today, so they can certainly make comment relative to that. Then number 3, it talks about how the streets may cross areas over 20% slope when the slope over 20% does not exceed 200 feet. They're recommending that 200 feet be a longer dimension. The ordinance, when we started out, did not allow for any exceptions to the over 20%. When we talked to the Planning Commission about this, we recognized that there should be some flexibility. And so 200 feet was the dimension that we took a look at. When you look at the HP3 zone, for example, the HP3 zone requires that the lot widths be 200 feet. So in essence, the smaller lots are 90 to 100 feet. In essence, you'd be either adding, in comparison, either one lot or possibly 2 lots in length. And whether or not that's an appropriate dimension or not, we've got Lauren online, I think, with us, and he might want to ask him that question. The implications for that 20% slope and crossing it is that it potentially opens the door for some fairly extensive cuts and fills. And whether or not that is the right number or the wrong number, I think that's a good starting point. And let's maybe ask, is Lauren still with us?
Yes.
Okay, let's ask Lauren about his opinion on that one.
All right. Let me talk a little bit about the 20% slope. As Rob mentioned previously, that we do not have a significant amount of ground that is 20%. Most of our slopes throughout the city are less than that area. So the frequency and the amount of roadways that would cross ground that is 20% is probably going to be few and far between. And I think that's one reason why we set this couple hundred feet as sort of a starting place. It may be that there are a few exceptions to that, but that seemed more reasonable just because we do not have a lot of area that exceeds that 20%. I don't know if that helps answer any questions or if you've got any questions.
Something on that, Lauren, would that be something that we would, rather than put a limit on length, is just saying roads may cross slopes of 20% more based on a engineer approval or something? That, I mean, I don't know where they would do it, but the same sense is 200 feet, if you're trying to put a curve or something in, that is pretty short.
Yeah, that's one option if the Planning Commission chooses to. recommend that language change. You know, we could live with that because those cases are going to be few and far between.
Yeah, because I'm not visualizing something like this would be where there would be lot frontage or access off that road. Maybe that's a limiting factor. You say it can cross that, but no lot shall have access on something like that. But it's more, say you're getting from one area to another, and this, you know, you put a side slope in the hillside that needs to be 400 or 500 feet long to get there. You don't have any lots on it. It's
Yeah.
really just an access between two areas.
Correct. And we were trying to minimize the potential scar on the hillside by those cuts and fills also. So, but you're right, it's few and far between, and it's access from one point to another.
So commissioners, it'll probably be good to hear from Cami and her design engineer. They may have some ideas with that. So I would suggest that we entertain this and then hold on to that thought. And then once we've heard a comment back from them, we can then address that issue. One thing we've got to make sure is that with the new state code and what have you, is that they want to have pretty specific standards with respect to these kinds of things. And maybe we get John Call to be putting his thinking cap on if you want to do some sort of some flexibility there, how that would occur. So I have one other thought with respect to the ordinance. Otherwise, I remember that there was some discussion we talked about with respect to building design. And we went back and forth on this. And so I wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission felt comfortable with the number that we included in here. You recall that we had the discussion about that with these hillsides and what have you, that we should try to build homes that are not going to be to inhibit views and those kinds of things. On page 15 of the ordinance, there's under item J, it says building heights for single family dwellings are limited to 1.5 stories or, and I've got 25 feet. So there's a couple ways you can approach that. If you want to remember, our single family standard is 35 feet, and that obviously is a very substantial height. So a couple of options is leave it the way that has in the draft. The second one would be to go to the 35 feet. The other one would be to just simply say, don't put a height through limitation, but limit it to 1.5 stories. So when you get to discussing, if you'll just put that on the discussion list as well. Beyond that, I think that concludes my presentation. The general plan for North Ogden has an extensive number of goals that I've included in the staff report that talk about the significance of public safety and making sure that projects are considered and approved on that hillside are met in such a way that we end up with a safe and functioning and suitable type of development up on those hillsides. With that, commissioners, those are the few comments that I have, and again, happy to answer questions.
Yeah, Mr. Scott, you mentioned having Cami address us, Cami Marriott, I assume.
Yes.
Was that as part of your presentation or part of the public hearing?
That would be part of the public hearing. Okay. I see her engineers on there along with Cami.
So a couple of questions I had is, I mean, I'm still in favor of just leaving the building height uniform throughout the city of the 35 feet. I'm not in favor of changing something just for, you know, I don't see the issue of that. The other question I had though, Rob, was, is there a reason why, you know, under buildable land at the very beginning in your definitions, we're saying that any land within a lot cannot have more than a 20% grade to it? Isn't that something we can just say the buildable area of a lot cannot exceed 20%, but a building lot could have, if you have a 5-acre lot or 10-acre lot over in the HP3 zone, and it's part of that steep hillside, going to the power lines, does it matter if it's over 20%? It's unusable, but it still could be part of somebody's lot.
Well, and we give options for that for that circumstance, so that where there are portions of that lot that are included in there. So there's the definition of buildable area, so that you have to meet a minimum of an area that is going to provide for, it's on page 7, buildable area. Single family structures shall be located only upon areas constituting buildable land, which areas shall be fully contiguous and shall be at least 5,000 square feet in size and shall have a minimum dimension of width and length of 50 feet. And then, so that's the minimum.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I read that wrong. I was reading that I was reading that as a buildable lot.
No,
it was land that couldn't have more than 20%, but that's just a buildable area. So
that's
I
the
understand
buildable
that
area, and then the
yeah,
item
that
above
makes total
that
sense. So that's completely fine. So
yeah, thank you.
See, guys, look, I read things wrong too.
So can I ask a question? Sorry,
Oh, absolutely, Johnson. Like this is Rob's presentation, and he's here to answer your questions.
So Rob, there's a comment here about building materials being of natural vegetation colors, and I actually think that's important. We all look up at the hillside there. How would that be enforced?
At the time of building permit, we would just look at the colors. Pretty much.
Well, what's to prevent someone from building a house and then painting it pink later?
Well, I'm glad I'm not the code enforcement person, and I'm glad that John Call is. But these kinds of projects not only have city enforcement, but also there's very few of them that wouldn't have an HOA. And my feeling is that there would be multiple folks that would get involved with a discussion about that type of thing.
Okay, yeah, just a question. So
no, it's a good question, and as we look at processes and what have you, it's probably something that we would ask our favorite application writer, Lynn, to help us make sure that those kinds of things are included in those applications. So that would remind an applicant that, hey, here's your standards that you have to meet. So, yeah, good question.
Rob,
Yes,
you
sir.
said you mentioned that a number of the engineers were present here tonight as well. We have a hand raised from a John Bierregard, and I was wondering if his comments were relevant to your presentation or should be saved for the public comment.
Probably for the public comment.
I don't know if you know him. Okay, let's just wait for the public comment then. Other questions for Mr. Scott? Okay, it sounds like we're going to have a public comment with some engineers, which is always great. So, I guess we need to open the public hearing, which I do by the banging of the fist.
Okay, John, please state your full name and address.
John Bierregard, Wasatch Civil Engineering. My address is 1949 East, 7775 South, South Weaver, Utah. We've been working with the Marriotts on this property for over a year, and our intent has always been to put houses where it's the best location for houses and to leave areas open. That's the best areas to leave open. We've just had 2 days to look at this. We noted those 3 things, but what I'm concerned about are there, as you get into the details and in depth, that there are more things that impact the Marriotts that that we can't foresee right now, that we should have more time to review and look at and evaluate. We're not opposed to the studies or the gathering of information, but the specific requirements concern us, that they may have a high impact upon the Marriotts that may constitute a taking. So they wouldn't be able to get the highest and best use of their property. And that's my concern.
Thank you for your comment. So, public hearing remains open. We have another comment.
Matt, go ahead.
This is Matt Murdoch with Wasatch Civil Engineering. I live at 755 Sunset Lane in South Ogden, Utah. Probably just to follow on what John has already said, basically we encourage and promote the health and safety up in these areas. And as we've had just brief time to look through this, we don't necessarily want to see any added restriction that would go above and beyond what the professionals would be doing and analyzing in this. So, thank you.
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, next is Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jim Grimal, and I live in Bountiful, Utah, but I own land there north of the mountain road that would fall into this area. And I just wanted to reiterate or endorse the previous comment, and that being this is a pretty extensive document, and we've had less than a week to take a look at it. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to it or for or against it. I just think not enough time has been given people to review the full impact of this document. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Brummel.
Next is Randy Marriott. Go ahead, Randy.
This is actually Tammy Marriott.
Okay.
Speaking, 1896 North, 3450 West in Plain City. I just wanted to comment for myself and for Randy that we agree with everything that's been said with a document this big and a lot of things to go through and understand. We feel like, you know, our engineers, Matt and John, have done a good job in addressing some of the major issues that it would propose to or would present to us, plus any other landowners that own property on the hillside up there. And would just hope that the city will consider some of our concerns, and that maybe we could even enter into some discussion. So if nothing else, we have a better understanding of what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. By the number of public, I'm going to delay here for a second, give anybody else an opportunity to speak.
I don't see any more hands.
Nor do I.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Nancaro, a second by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor to close the public hearing, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
So Chair Mason,
Yes.
one of the things that we don't want to do, we're not trying to rush this thing by any stretch of the imagination. If the folks that have communicated with us tonight feel like they need some additional time, I would suggest that you give them a couple of weeks to take a look at that, and we can digest if they can get their comments to us the next 2 weeks, so that we could then be in a position to respond to those and bring those recommendations back to the Planning Commission. I'd be more than pleased to do that.
Yeah. I've debated that in my head also, because I mean, the counterpoint to that is that there may be people who attended tonight's meeting who are, have reviewed this and are for it, and we're looking to see it go on, and I just hate to draw out the process for those people. I think that's probably unlikely, and I think the more common, the more likely situation is that, let's just give some more people some time to review it. But I was thinking, we've had plenty of time to review it, and it is a recommendation to the city council. So it's not set in stone with anything tonight. But I hear what you're saying, Scott, and that seems reasonable.
In light of the public comments tonight, specifically being the majority of the comments were made by the majority of the landowners impacted with this zone, I make a motion that we table this item until the second meeting of April, giving sufficient time for them to review it and make comments back.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we vote on tabling this item? Okay. In light, to vote for tabling the item, Commissioner Thomas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Barker?
Yes.
Commissioner Arner?
Yes.
Commissioner Webb?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt?
Yes.
And Commissioner Nancaro?
Yes.
So what I would request is that those
do I get a vote? Do I get a vote?
only if you allow yourself to.
Okay, I vote yes to tabling the item as well.
Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
So given that, I would appreciate either Matt or John or the other gentleman, if they would send me an email and say, this is the amount of time I need. And then that way we can address their concerns.
Okay.
So if they can have them to us within 3 weeks or 2 weeks, whatever, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. I do, one of my concerns with tabling, it wasn't that I was trying to speed this through, but it is, to give it due process to those who may have sat through 2.5 hours of this to watch how this ends up, right? And then it just seems like, what did I just do for 2.5 hours? So that was my only concern. I'm not trying to force anything through on anybody, obviously. I just, feel like sometimes things.
I agree with you, but I don't think there's anything pending that we feel like we need to get this done to address. And so I think that is good, but maybe, rather than an email, Rob, John and Matt on there, or Cammie, do you guys feel like if we meet the last meeting of April to rediscuss this, does that give you sufficient time to review this? I would like to set something so it just doesn't linger, but. Sorry, you probably have to let them speak, Lynn, if they.
There is a chat, and Matt says yes.
Okay. So we would just need to make sure those comments or concerns are in probably, what do you need, Rob? 10 days to 2 weeks before our meeting, so they can be addressed on our side and then still published in the meeting.
Sorry, I was muted. So the second meeting is the 21st. So it would be helpful if we could have everything to us by the 7th.
Okay. Does that work for you, Matt?
He said yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking at my computer and I'm on my phone for the Zoom, so it's over on the charger, so I'm not seeing chat, sorry.
Yeah, they're good with that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Where are we? We are familiar with each of our agenda items, and it brings us to the last couple items here, which is remarks from the planning commissioners. Does anybody have anything to bring before the planning commission? I mean, I'd just like to add that I love the discussion, and you know, nothing would please me more than to see a split vote on things and to see people vote no, because you know, it tells me that people are really thinking about this and not just kind of nodding along. So just to reiterate what was said earlier by Commissioner Nancaro, you know, a no vote, even to my own proposal, would be, and don't do it just to vote no, right? But like, but by all means, if no is what you're thinking, then please vote that way. You know, even if you're the last person to vote, your vote doesn't really count. Any other comments?
I agree 100% with you, Commissioner Mason.
Thanks. Okay, report from our planning director.
So I want to compliment this commission tonight. When you're dealing with policy issues, such as the rezone earlier and then text amendments to our policy documents and what have you, they really do deserve the amount of time and constructive review that you are giving them. And part of that is so often we have people that don't understand the relationship between a policy document like our general plan and how that should help guide us to a decision. Sometimes when we talk about policy items, we're talking about things in very broad terms. And then when we get to, okay, here's the extent of our options, how do we narrow that down to what's really acceptable? So I applaud the idea of utilizing development agreements to be able to get to that point. So very well done. The second thing is my last day with the city is April 1st. I think some of you know that. I think you all know that. But I have committed to John Call that I will be willing to work on a couple of projects, and this is definitely one of them. So I just feel so strongly that this is whatever you end up adopting. It's one of the most significant pieces of policy that we're going to be adopting here in a long, long time for the city.
Meaning the overlay.
The overlay, correct.
Sensitive lands overlay.
And so this is sort of my swan song, but not. I just can't say how much I have enjoyed my time with North Ogden. I can't believe it's been 7 years. It's gone by so quickly. The extent of being able to work with this planning commission and commissioners before you all, that just been a real special thing for me as I've associated with you to make what is a very special city in all of Utah something that is not only you can be proud of, but it's a livable place that is so desirable for the hard work and the standards and the other kinds of things that you all are doing. So again, thank you very much for putting up with me.
So, Mr. Scott, did you ever think your last meeting would be a Zoom call?
No, I didn't.
I reiterate the appreciation, Rob. Like, you know, you're the only one I've ever worked with as far as a planning director, but you've been the best one.
Yeah.
No, but really, you taught me so much. And you know, the times I've been wrong and you kind of rebuked me on things, it's been done in a way that I just felt like I learned and could get better next time. And I think that's just, you were ideal for the city. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
It has been wonderful working with you, Rob, for sure.
Thank you.
Rest of us are just too emotional to say something, Rob. So thanks for all you do.
I know Eric especially is blanked out his picture. Otherwise, we'd see him with all these crocodile tears and cleaning.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I don't want the camera on there.
I'm glad it's not goodbye there, Rob. I'm glad we're going to still be working with you a little bit.
Yes, indeed.
The nice thing-
If John will still let me.
I was going to say, the nice thing is, Rob, you told him you're not done until they pass this thing. So it's really in their hands when you're done, right?
Tabled again. Any other remarks from anyone? We have the city manager still to hear from.
So I was just going to add, I'm glad Rob mentioned it. Obviously, I was going to bring it up as well, but we really have appreciated Rob and the level of professionalism that he's brought to the city with staff reports and follow up and all the things that 40 years in the business bring. Anyways, thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, I don't know how to end this after that, but we'll see you at the Christmas party, hopefully.
So Eric, are you available with your van on the 31st?
Yeah.
Great. We'll work out
unless my wife drags me somewhere. I think is that the beginning of spring break?
I have no idea.
Actually,
No,
I guess
spring
that
break's
is
the next week. After that.
So yes, I'll be here.
Right.
Do we have enough people, I guess, for a quorum by chance, is everybody planning to go somewhere for spring break? Or I don't think that's usually an issue.
So
but
yeah, the meeting on the
right?
7th is during spring break, and I will ask to be excused. I won't be around.
And I'm not
Sounds like we have a
sure.
quorum.
So
What's that?
I'm not sure at the moment. We've talked about different things, but I don't know anything right now.
Okay, I'd encourage us all to just email as your plans change. Obviously, we're not going to hold you to what you're doing a few weeks from now, but let us know through email. And as of this time, we're still planning on a meeting 2 weeks from now.
And I had
No. 2 weeks from now is the 2 weeks from now is the whatever field trip, and then 2 weeks after that. So 4 weeks from now.
What, 1 week after that?
It's actually 1 week, yeah.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's 2 weeks and 3 weeks.
Do you guys think because of a lack of a quorum that we should skip the meeting on the 7th and just reconvene on the 21st, or do we have too much stuff to cover?
Well, one option is you could look at just holding a regular meeting on the 31st and skipping the one on the 7th. I would try to.
We have a quorum, don't we? I mean, I don't like having meetings, but I mean, we got Eric that's out and Alan that's out.
I'm not for sure I'm out. So
okay. So
I think we're
Alan
okay.
Out and Lisa may be out. I think we're good.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's late, but I can do that much, man.
But because it's Zoom, I think we could, even if I'm gone, I'm most likely to be able to attend.
True.
Very good.
I'll just cover you. No problem.
Yeah, I just won't show up. Just make y'all think I got hit in the traffic zone of the city.
All right, guys. Thanks again to Rob Scott. I think I'm entertaining a motion to dismiss.
And I'll second.
I guess I made a motion to dismiss. Seconded by Commissioner Arner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.
Just for you, Brandon, I'm voting nay. There. I said no. Everybody else said yes.
I see you guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.